All right, I think we're good to go. Somebody just go
The
live.
word you cannot hear is not "ni," but
it's a basilisk or an information hazard.
Oh, maybe. I guess what happened was it wasn't loud enough for Discord to activate the threshold. Oh, I could add things to the show in this way because it's still Audition picks it up.
Yep, and unless I was paying attention, I might notice that the waveforms are different because I actually matched them up. But I hear that. All right.
Ooh, I'm a spooky ghost.
Ooh.
Guess it's not working.
No, might have just been a glitch, a blip.
Who knows?
It's Monday, June 27th, 2022. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight we are talking about refrigeration technology. And finally, we are free. Hockey is over. I don't have to think about, when's the next hockey game?
Until for a
little while.
4 months, 3 or 4 months.
Yep. And all I'll say is, you know what? I was rooting for the Avalanche because, one, they were going to win anyway. Like, that path was determined. Round one showed me the way. And
I mean, it was, I thought they were going to win since early in the regular season. But on the other hand, it's like, none of these, neither one was a team that I hated or had bad people on it, that I was aware of or anything.
Though, what's funny is right around this time, you see that ESPN has that big documentary about basically the hockey era of my childhood, the Red Wings Avalanche rivalry.
Yeah, because they've went against each other several years.
Exactly. But it's no longer a rivalry. Like, the teams don't give a shit about each other. Like, the hockey's very different now. But
divisions change and all sorts of stuff, right?
But I'm very happy that the Rangers made it as far as they did. Conference finals, nothing to cry about. Like,
we did not think we were going to make it there.
Yep. And this is one of those teams. Rangers have got a few years of stay this good and just keep trying for a cup. And maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. But basically,
the problem is like the Rangers are quite good, but you look at these teams like the Avalanche specifically, right? And it's like you could just see they're so far ahead of the other teams. It's like, if the average team is a strength of 5, right? The Rangers might have a strength of 7.5 or 8.
Yeah.
It's like there's a lot of teams with a similar strength of 7.5, 8, 9, right? But the Avalanche have a strength of like 11 or 12.
Well, I think I read a bunch.
Nobody else is like, up there. It's like, well,
I read a bunch of analysis of people trying to say like, what's the deal? Like, what exactly is happening? And there actually are pretty common themes, even among a bunch of people who normally disagree with each other, but they seem to come down to more depth in the team, like better coordination among the lines, like really just basic stuff. But also, everyone made the point that they are proof that you do not need a good goalie to be a good NHL team.
You have to have an okay goalie.
Oh, no, but I saw people pointing out that people making an argument that they didn't even need a good goalie. Their goalie didn't even actually have to deal with that many shots.
I mean, yeah, that's definitely part of it, right? But he was slightly subpar, right? I think he let in like a few over expected, but it's not like he was awful or terrible or anything. If you had
but it shows that
goalie, more, he did make saves. They would have gone in if you had a terrible goalie, right?
Yep. But look, like, Vasilevsky and Shesterkin, 2 of the best goalies in the game right now, and yet I think we've discovered, as we talked about before when we were waiting for this matchup, we were about to see the immovable object versus the unstoppable force. Turns out unstoppable force will beat immovable object every time in hockey.
Right, because even the greatest goalie, they're not a superhuman who can just stop every single shot no matter how ridiculous, right? So therefore, it's like if you have the best goalie in the universe, but the rest of your team isn't good enough, the other team is going to get 1,000,000 shots, and even though only 0.05% of them go in, it's like they just make enough shots and they make good enough ones, they're going to go in.
I saw an argument.
Get into the offensive zone, you can't score goals, and the other team could just beat you 1-0. It could happen.
Yeah.
So.
I did see one argument, though, that Colorado has the extra X factor of they're a high elevation team. So
I think there's some, it's not completely without merit, but I think it is nonsense because if that was the case, we would see Colorado teams in all athletic sports winning more often.
Not necessarily, because that type of like if the equivalent of doping, it's basically natural doping. Doping meaning putting extra red blood cells in, essentially. That only primarily benefits you in extreme endurance sports, but not in like other kinds of explosive action sports.
The point we don't see,
and we do see people who
athletes
come from higher
Denver.
elevations doing better on average in like foot races and many types of track and field events.
The best track and field people are all from like, Nigeria.
Yeah, but statistically, of course, there are individuals can overcome anything like that. But overall, high elevation training is effective at certain kinds of sports. But anyway, hockey's done. Don't have to worry about hockey anymore. I heard you got a plant.
Well, I mean, so I had a lot of house plants, right? But the thing with the house plants is that, it's hard to, if you just, buy plants and it's like off at a random place, just say, oh, that plant looks nice, I'll buy it. You don't know, what kind of plant it is specifically, how to take care of it.
Maybe at best it's got that little card that gives you vague instructions that assume you know a lot.
Yeah. And then it's like, if you don't have, a garage or a yard, it's like, it's hard to take care of plants just in a pot in an apartment. It's like, what are you going to do? You buy a bag of dirt? Where are you going to put a bag of dirt in an apartment? You don't have it's like.
We have a container. Remember the old GeekNights container? That is currently on the balcony. And in that container is the bag of dirt and a bunch of other stuff like that. It's basically my shed.
Wasting my balcony space on bag of dirt. Right?
Our balcony's huge, so it doesn't really take up any material amount of space.
The point is that it's a pain in the ass to do things like repotting plants or whatever. There's nowhere to go to do that, right? So one of the things I planned to do during my time of not work, which has got a couple more weeks left, was go take care of the house plants because they're all alive, but some of them were falling over because they were too big for the pot. Some of them were alive but sad, so I took them to this plant store. And the plant store was basically the ideal retail establishment, right? So, we always talk about just buy shit online. It's cheaper, right?
Well, what do we always say? We always said, unless you need to talk to an expert and the store you're going to will have an expert. Like Best Buy never had an expert.
Retail stores usually don't have experts, don't have good selection, don't have good prices, don't offer anything, right? But this particular plant store, I go in and I went up to the counter where, this woman was sitting and but she, didn't seem like she wanted to help me. She seemed like she was, right? Like working and cashiering and that sort of thing. And like, she didn't want a customer service very much. And it turns out this other person in the store, this broy dude who I just thought was a customer, was actually the owner. And he was, it's like, you look at this guy, and if you had seen this dude in any other setting, the street, the park, anywhere, you'd think he was just some broy dude who was, gonna get drunk, party, drive a fart car, right?
And he might be.
Right, New York dude. But this dude was the owner of a plant store and an enormous plant nerd, like plant nerd the way that we're a computer nerd, right? And he was so happy, right? It's like what he was doing would have normally counted as mansplaining, if not the fact that I was specifically asking for the explanation.
It's funny. Right? We had the same experience recently. There's a little plant store that has a lot of succulents near us, like by the Huntress. Same deal. The people in there know everything. They're like mega plant nerds.
Right. This dude is a huge plant nerd, and he repotted my plants, and he's like, oh, you got to get some fertilizer for this one. And he's like, you should get this kind. And I'm like, do you sell that? And he's like, no, I don't sell that. I sell plants.
That's the surest sign of a real expert in a store, if they will recommend things that they don't even sell.
And I was like, yeah, this plant came with this kind of dirt, but I had to switch it to this kind of dirt because I couldn't find the kind of dirt it came with. And he's like, I make my own dirt. I'm like, all right. But hey, he repotted my plants, and I bought a new plant there, and I got some newer pots, and it was, now my house plant situation is all very nice now. So
I think there's something to this ongoing just belief and assumption and pop culture idea that millennials are obsessed with plants.
Houseplant popularity is actually way up, which is probably why stores.
Well,
like
case in point, there's so many like deciduous focused the stores for different types of plants, even all over Brooklyn, all along Kent. There's like 3 of them. There's one by Nighthawk. There's one right next to us. There's another one over by the Pulaski. They're just everywhere.
And people got plants.
Little succulents. Get a little succulent. Yeah.
They want more. People want plants at when they had offices. Every office I ever worked in, people were always having plants at the desk, right? So.
Yeah. I wonder if we're allowed to have plants at our desks. I've never seen one at anyone's desk.
Really? Never? I've never not seen one.
I mean, our desks are tiny at work.
I guess my past 3 jobs, which is going back, a long time because I kept the jobs for a long time each. But that's like 15 years worth. People always had plants. So.
Yeah, the only thing on my desk is one little Goomba.
Okay.
Yep. So
my desk now is nothing. I don't have an office desk anymore. I just have this as my only desk. Got one.
So, get into the news. One non-tech news, but we can't not talk about it. Of course, go read Real News to find out more. If this is if you're hearing about this from Geek Nights, once again, I don't know what to say except go read something.
Maybe they're from another country or something. I don't know.
Yeah, if you're in the U.S. And you're hearing about this from us, shame on you. But if you're outside the U.S., this has grave portents for other countries too. This is a big problem. Basically, of course, the U.S. Supreme Court has been compromised because the traitor guy who took over our government in an illegitimate election in 2016 cheated and appointed a bunch of people to our court. And if you're not familiar with the American courts, basically our Supreme Court is invincible. The people on it are appointed for life, and there is zero accountability and supreme power. And we're kind of screwed right now because there's no way to kick someone off the Supreme Court.
You can impeach them, but it's basically impossible.
It requires a supermajority in our Senate, which is 50% controlled by the fascists. And unable to be changed significantly for reasons. So we're in deep shit, and they've basically...
At least if you agree to follow the rules that are written in the Constitution.
Yeah, which... that would be a coup. I'm not saying...
We're still doing for now, right? So
to a degree, the Department of Justice and the military effectively said that they're going to ignore state laws and make sure that service members can get whatever health care they need, which is a start. But
federal land,
yep.
Then there's nothing they could do. But
basically what this means is about half of the American states either have now or will imminently ban basically all abortions. And the other half of America's states are enshrining the right to abortions in their own constitutions. And the Republican Party in our country has said pretty much straight up that if they take back the government, they're going to ban it nationally. They're going to pass a law that just bans it in all 50 states. So the only way
we could just filibuster that forever, the same as they do.
Nope, they could if they pass it, they could overturn the filibuster because you need 51 votes to overturn the filibuster and change the rules.
Well,
we don't have 51 votes. We have 48 Democratic senators and 2 traitors.
Okay.
So basically, the only legal thing you can do if you're not down for a coup, other than protesting and harm mitigation, is effectively in the U.S. we got to pick up at least 1 net seat in the Senate in the 2022 election, because a lot of people on the left who are screaming and freaking out are also kind of yelling at the wrong people in one specific regard. Our Senate voted in May to overturn the filibuster and enshrine a basic form of abortion rights nationally, which would undermine this rule. That bill went down 49-51. One piece of shit Democratic Senator Joe Manchin voted against it, meaning if we pick up even 1 seat, we should be able to do the exact same vote, and it would get through the filibuster on a technicality. So that's what we can do, and the most likely one is Pennsylvania, where the cool guy is running, Fetterman.
But even if we do that, we have to keep that, because at any moment, if the other side takes over the government, they could just pass the opposite law.
Yep. Well, once we get that, the other next step is we got to either pack the court or abolish the Supreme Court or do something. We got to do something egregious, which is possible. Packing the court is something FDR threatened to do. It's doable, but it requires getting rid of the filibuster.
FDR was not a perfect individual.
Not saying he was, but on that regard.
He had guts. He said, this is what I want to happen, and he made it happen, right?
Yep. So we'll see. You got to at least 1 more Democrat has to be in the Senate for anything to happen.
Well, I mean, it's just, the same crisis that's been happening for a long time continues to happen.
Yep.
And,
The American population is
who
concentrated
knows?
into a handful of states, and the rest of the empty land gets overrepresented in our government because our Constitution is what is.
Before we were born, and we're still alive. And
Our Constitution is old and crufty, and if you notice, we haven't amended it in a long time, except for trivial stuff. It's starting to run out of steam, that thing.
Oh, what are we going to do?
We'll see. So I encourage you to read more about this and look at what options you have for doing something about it. And if you're against abortion, I don't know what stop listening to Geek Nights. Like, what are you even doing here? So in other news that is not that, Geek Nights Monday technology, Google is actually both of our newses. Google is shutting down Hangouts, which I feel like they have announced.
News. We knew this was announced a long time ago.
I feel like this has been announced at least half a dozen times in some form.
They keep, changing their fucking minds over there. It's like it's bad enough to start things and then, get users and then turn them off. It's another thing to not just turn something off, but to transition to other products and change branding. And because now not only are you hurting people by turning off a thing that they've come to depend on,
Yep.
but you're now also confusing people, right? It's like, having Allo and Duo and chat and
We are
Hangout and-
we are terminally online technologists who have been doing a podcast for 15 years on technology, and yet I have to go look up what the fuck Google is doing and what app does what in this ecosystem.
Right. It seems like they're finally getting everything in order, and that I don't know what the time frame on this is, but when all is said and done, they are going to have all of the text chatting consolidated into Google Chat, which will be a product that is somewhere in between a Slack and a, Hangout DM thing, but no one's really going to use it, basically.
I mean, I don't even use Hangouts or any of this anymore.
We used to use it, but then, I stopped using it years ago when they basically fucked it up, and then that was it.
I moved everything into Discord.
I don't know anyone the only time I've seen it used recently is that, if you work from working at companies, the companies I've worked for recently have used, the Google Chat, right? As sort of the backup if Slack goes down.
Nah.
So even if the companies have Google, workspaces, for their email, it's like they're only using that for email. They're not using that for chatting on a regular basis. They have Slack, right?
Yep.
My ring light is having a problem with the USB cable.
In my life,
is flaky. It's
basically
flaky.
when Google Hangouts started breaking and all the problems happened, that's basically when I jumped ship to Discord. And today I'd say that 80% of the people who want to talk to me just DM me on Discord or talk to me in a Discord. Another 10% still SMS me. A handful of people, including my mom, Twitter DM me, and everything else is email, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean this is a sort of a fundamental thing.
I guess I roll SMS and Signal together because they work the same way. It doesn't matter which one's which when someone messages me.
The point is that any service in which requires any platform in which users make accounts, right? It becomes basically trivial for that service to add a feature which allows users to direct message each other. And even if that service is not a messaging service, that is, where that is the primary use of it, right? It becomes also a necessary and helpful feature, right? So let's say you have, I don't know, eBay, right? eBay's primary feature is buying and selling shit, right?
Yep.
But if you're going to have a transaction with someone, it becomes useful and necessary to have some sort of way to message that person and converse with a person that you are having a transaction with.
Yep, like Uber. Right? All the problems with Uber notwithstanding, you got to be able to chat with the person who's picking you up in case, wait, what intersection are you at? Confusion. Airbnb. There are good reasons for this in terms of if you have a conversation through the Airbnb platform, then the company has a record of that in case there's fraud or malfeasance. There's a lot of reasons why this makes sense. But now to your point, I have all these messaging systems that each have a very specific purpose.
Yeah, I mean, it's so what happens is there's all these DM platforms everywhere, and people will just start using one. And the platforms that used to exist, that whose sole purpose was text messaging, right? Other than SMS, all the other ones have really kind of bitten it, right? In favor of things that are also something else, right? You know, even your WhatsApps and things of that nature, it's like they're also sort of like a group chat thing, and they also, right? Or, you know, it's like Facebook is also Facebook Messenger, and Instagram has DMs in it, even though it was primarily a photo thing originally, at least. You know, it's like, so those end up getting all the users, and then, you know, things like Google Hangout just, right, falling over. So,
So along those lines, even in more news, Google is combining Duo, which I guess still exists.
Still existed.
I remember I installed Duo. It didn't work with domains at the time, so I never used it even once. And then
that was the last time they tried to do this. They made the Allo and the Duo, and we're like, okay.
I forgot about Allo.
Right. It lasted 5 minutes, you know, whatever.
Did they launch them at like the same time? And I did.
Yeah, that was the idea. That was their original attempt, was to replace Hangout with Allo and Duo.
Yeah.
And then now they're going to have chat, and they're going to have Meet, which Meet is the only thing that Google has, I think, that's going to actually have sustained usage, because any company even a company that uses Google Workspaces and pays for it is going to be using Slack or Microsoft Teams or something. They're not going to be using the Google Chat, right? But the Google Meet, companies use that, except for companies that might pay extra and use Zoom instead, right? The best ones, right, still to this day, I still believe that iMessage and especially FaceTime are the best as a product, but they only work if everyone has an Apple device, and therefore they're never going to be a solution for pretty much anyone.
Like I only recently got an Apple device, and even today, the vast majority of people I interact with online do not have even one Apple device.
But even if they do have an Apple device, it's like as soon as you have one person who doesn't, right? So it's like maybe the only people you talk to in your life are your family, and they all have Apple devices, in which case it's going to be fantastic for you, right? It's going to be amazing. Maybe every single friend you have, you're a high school student, and all of your friends have iPhones, literally everybody, and you don't have a single person who doesn't have one, right? Well, it's going to be fantastic for you to use iMessage and FaceTime. Life is going to be great, right? But if you have online friends, if you're a connected person, or if you have friends in the community, right? You go to, say, I don't know, a club or a volunteer group or a religious organization or a city council community board thing, any kind of social group that you interact with, right? A bowling league, right? There's gonna be, at some point along the way, there's gonna be people who are not using it, right? And it ends up being that the universal platforms that work, no matter what computer or device someone has, right? Even if they're shittier, right? Zoom is shittier, right, than FaceTime. It's gonna win, right? And so Google Meet is really good if you have a company and everyone's using Google Workspaces. Everyone can use Google Meet, and it works for in-company stuff. But as soon as you have to interact with another company, if that company's not using Google Workspaces also, guess what? Now your company is also going to use Zoom to interact with the other
I have
company.
at least found that Zoom has displaced almost everything else, and I find that every professional interaction I have is Zoom now.
Right, and then your company is going to be like, well, we have to interact with people outside the company and use Zoom. Then why the fuck are we going to use Google Meet for internal and Zoom for external? Let's just use Zoom for everything. That way we're using less things, and then you're not using Google Meet anymore.
Yep.
So I think that's the fundamental thing Google has to do.
The sad thing, though, is
its products out there. I think it's sort of lost because, like, it's like this. Are people even using Gmail anymore? Like, who need email?
Well, because no one sends emails. I increasingly find that, and not from an old person complaining if you should use email for everything. That's ridiculous. But email is good if you want to send someone like a whole ass page of text. And I have people who will like SMS me a long thread that could have just been one email.
Sure, but I'm saying it's like, if there are people who are new, we have Gmail because right? If I had to start using email today, I wouldn't choose Gmail, right? Not a chance. The reason I use Gmail is because back in the day, I had college email, right? And at the time, everyone was using the email their ISP gave them, whether that was the college or whatever, AOL or, something. And then we entered the next period where it's like you weren't dependent. Your ISP could no longer give you services, right? Because they couldn't compete with the services like the ones that were provided by, web apps, right? So people moved to Gmail, right? But now it's like, at the time, Gmail was the only one. That was the game.
I would probably still use Gmail today because I'm thinking about all the alternatives, and I would probably just get a Gmail account.
I would use maybe the iCloud email, or there's some other ones out there that are good options also.
Not a ton though. You start scraping the bottom of the barrel pretty quick.
I just had
gonna get a Microsoft account.
If I only had to choose between Microsoft, Google, Apple. I guess Facebook doesn't give out email, right?
In that situation, I guess I might go with Microsoft if I didn't go with Gmail.
I would choose the Apple one. Of those three choices, I would choose the Apple. If I didn't have any existing anything, the Apple one is the easy choice, for sure.
Yep. Of course, I didn't have an iPhone until recently.
I'm just, even if I had no devices at all, right? Just choosing only the email app and nothing else is set yet. The Apple one is still.
But I got to say, good Lord, when now that, not that COVID is winding down, but as I've interacted with humans again a little more frequently, I am reminded that outside of my close circles, if you ask someone how you can get in touch with them, I have found that a lot of people don't actually have a good answer anymore. Like non-online people aren't really sure, and they'll mumble something about Facebook, or maybe they have a cell phone number they'll give you a text, and that's about it.
Yeah, because they're really only, communicating frequently. If they don't have an online presence where they're communicating with lots of people, it's like how do they communicate with their family? Like maybe they are one of those Apple only families that all FaceTimes each other. But it's like, how do I get in touch with you? Well, they're not going to give you their fucking FaceTime. That's not how it's going to, you're not going to, you just have to send them a quick message. It's like, they don't have a personal email that they're checking, right, constantly, right? They're not an online person. They don't.
I'd give people my direct Discord, but a lot of people don't. Discord is terrifying and confusing to them.
Yeah, they're not going to and they'd have to make an account for it, which they're not going to do just to talk to one person.
I would advise everyone, as a total aside and related to the first news we talked about, I would suggest installing Signal and just setting it up, even if you don't use it. Signal is...
I have it set up and never use it.
Yep. If you set it up and never use it, it will... If you message someone else who has Signal, then you'll have end-to-end encryption. Like, it's legit and it works, and that might be useful, depending on how things go.
I don't think that works like that if you just use the iPhone Messages app. It's not just going to be like...
I use the Signal app.
Yeah, I use the iPhone Messages app.
No, you got to use the Signal app or it doesn't do shit.
Yeah. Well, that's not, and I installed it and I don't use it.
Nah, see, I installed it and I actually do use it. I replaced SMS with it.
Yeah, iMessages is also end-to-end encrypted.
Mm-hmm. All right,
anyway,
put a little. Signal also has disappearing messages and man-in-the-middle prevention and impersonation prevention.
If I need it, I need it. I don't,
Yeah. All right. But anyway, things of the day. So I'm linked to a tweet because the tweet links to a video, but the tweet also gives some context. The video is in German. It won't matter that much. It doesn't actually matter what they're saying. And it looks like there's subtitles in multiple languages. But my thing of the day is a video where there is a 15th century bathhouse in Germany. And it has been restored and renovated.
A late medieval bathhouse.
Yep. It has been restored and renovated to be fully functional and period correct. And it's a museum. And this video is two naked German guys taking you through the full experience. And I got to tell you, bathhouses are something super cool that I wish Americans respected more. And I wish we hadn't destroyed all of them at the end of the 20s and 30s.
All right, so I think we've done an episode on sound cards a long time ago, but for people who aren't aware, right? Computers originally, the only sound they had was beep, beep, right? And then, the motherboard didn't have any sound audio facilities on it. You had to put a card in your computer that had synthesizers and other sorts of audio chips on it.
You probably got an ad-lib card. Maybe you got a sound blaster.
Right. And so, so some, when it comes to playing fully recorded audio samples like MP3s, WAV files, anything like that, it doesn't really matter what sound card it is because have the exact wave that is going to be played is recorded and then played. But the earliest computers, and consoles could not do that because the amount of memory it would take to store a high fidelity audio sample of any length before we invented MP3s and processors fast enough to, decompress them quickly, was vast, and you didn't have a lot of storage space in early computers. And so that didn't work out. So what you do is you put a synthesizer in your computer, and then it took up very little space to just basically have the equivalent of digital sheet music or even just, a program that would, generate, sheet music effectively as it processed to instruct the synthesizer. Basically, it's like a keyboard without any keys, and there's a processor that pushes the keys electronically, right? And because of that, every computer and every sound card sounded differently, right? The Commodore 64 sounded great. Some old Apple computers could really just go, meh, meh. Yeah. It's like, but there are people with nostalgia, and there are people with preservation interests, and people with, various reasons would want to have, those exact or as close enough to it, right? The exact synthesizers that were in those old sound cards so that they could, use old software and hear exactly what it sounded like back in the day, create music that is retro. So many reasons that you would want an old sound card. And old sound cards, not necessarily easy to acquire. There just might not be a lot of them. There might not be a lot of them that work, right? They might not, even if you buy a Sound Blaster 16 and you find one that mint inbox, guess what? That shit's an ISA card, and your computer does not have an ISA slot.
Your computer doesn't even have a PCI slot.
All right, so it's like, well, how are you going to hook that up to your computer? You probably could find a way, some sort of adapter, and write a bunch of drivers, or get an old computer also, but that sucks. So here we have somebody who in 2019 compiled this forum post, the comprehensive list of all modern reproductions of vintage sound cards.
Ooh.
And it's exactly what it is. It's a comprehensive list of modern reproductions of classic sound cards. And they've updated this list as recently as May 2022. So just, last month. So they just been updating this forum post. And it's like, yep, you can get some Creative Music System, Yamaha YMF 262s, right? Sound Blasters, Crystal, whatever.
No, I have this terrifying urge to spin up the old Sound Blaster AW32.
Right, but here are, some of these are actually people who have produced boards for sale. Some of them are plans for boards that you can put together yourself. All sorts of things here, but if you're interested in, replicating the sounds of old computers with new computers, this is the link for you to click on.
Mm-hmm. In the meta moment, the GeekNights Book Club book, 9 Fox Gambit. We're done with it. The only reason we didn't do a show on Thursday is because we were busy. So, and I think we're going to be busy on Wednesday, so no show on Wednesday this week. But next week on Thursday, even if we record it in advance, that will be the 9 Fox Gambit show. We're done with the book.
That'll be the last show before I have to start another job.
Yeah.
Unless they decide to unhire me before I start.
Exciting times. Legitimately exciting. But 9 Fox Gambit's real good. I got a lot to say about it. And we're not going to talk about the second book in that book club book episode. But I will say that having read most of the second book in the series, I'm going to finish the series. I mean, granted, I think...
You always finish the series.
I was about to say, I don't think that was...
Your RIM series finisher to cost.
I was about to say, Scott was probably going to point out that with one exception, I've never not finished a series. I fucking read all 14
Every
books of the
single
Wheel of
time
Time.
I've made a book club selection that was the first book of a series. Rim has gone on to finish that series, and I have usually not done so.
Wheel of Time, you followed a little further than I expected.
I read, I don't know, it might have been 4 or 5 Wheels of Time. I don't know how many.
Yep.
At least a few.
Meanwhile, a month later, I was like, hey, I'm on book 13. And you were like, what?
I've read every published Prince of Nothing book.
Yep. And I doubt there'll be any more, which...
I highly doubt there'll ever be any more.
Little troublesome because I would like to know, but anyway.
Anyway.
But I'm enjoying the 9 Fox Gambit. By Thursday, I got to pick what the next book club book is. I got a few ideas. As much as I want to pick it, I'm not going to pick Emily Wilson's newer translation of a different work because...
Well, I mean, it's like, I'm going to read that for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to read that too.
The point is like, stop just picking sequels and things related to existing book club books. It would be preferable to get variety, right? If every book club book was something, going down a new road and not rehashing an old road.
I will resist the urge, at least for one more cycle, to pick a nonfiction book, though. But I'm going to warn you now, my next book club book after this one will very likely be nonfiction.
Boo.
I love me some nonfiction.
Boo.
Don't worry, this one will be fiction and maybe pulp. Well, I'm thinking.
Well,
Okay.
I'll just pick some computer book. That's not fiction, right?
I mean, you could. Just remember, anything you pick just gives me the opportunity, if I feel that it is justified, to bust out my favorite Count, the Count
It's like,
of Monte
can I
Cristo.
take structure and interpretation of computer programs as a book club book.
I mean, if you do, Count of Monte Cristo is going to be the next book club book, and that book is longer.
I don't know if you would understand. Would it the art of programming by Newt as a book? It's like, is that even gonna work?
If you pick that, you know what? I could do some technical like NATO doctrine book or some bullshit. The stuff that I read for fun. I'm not saying you wouldn't understand it. I just don't think you'd like it.
I would be, just, if you want to humor me, I guess I'll just ask you to do this. I can't make you, right? But go SICP. You can just read it for free, right?
Oh yeah, I've read excerpts from it before.
Go try to read the first chapter, and it's down. It'll end with some. It's a textbook, so it'll end with some quiz questions, I guess, in the first chapter.
Yep.
And just see if you even understand what the fuck is going on.
Yep. It's tough because I am a computer professional and a technologist, but I am an information technologist. I am not a computer scientist.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yep. Otherwise, PAX West, there will very, very likely be at least one Geek Nights panel there, but the odds are it'll be either just me or just me and Emily. Emily will be there for some other professional reasons. I can't say that we'll be at any specific cons beyond that. I feel like Scott and I might do a panel together at PAX Unplugged, even if we don't go to the rest of it.
PAX Unplugged to happen, right? We've reached the point where I was just like, yep, cons are going to happen or not, and the answer was not. But now we're at the point where it's like, listen,
Unplugged requires...
I don't know if I'm going to go to PAX Unplugged.
I'll say this. Of all the PAXs, PAX Unplugged requires the least advanced decision from me and Scott to decide if we're going to go. It's the least planning. It can be a day trip very easily. Like, that's a short trip. It's a lot easier to plan a PAX Unplugged to the last second for us than literally any other PAX.
Right, but we're at the point where it's like I really would like to go to PAX Unplugged, and I hope other people I know would go there to play games with. But who knows what's going to happen, right?
Yep. But I can at least say that I will almost definitely be presenting at least one panel at PAX West. But I cannot promise that you will see me at the con at any other point than the panels, because I'll be in Seattle for other reasons and probably not hanging out mostly alone in the convention center for 4 days.
Yep. The website is coming along very nicely. I'm just about done with the part of the website that you won't see, which is the tooling that will let Rim upload episodes easily and completely. It took a long time because I was getting really fancy in terms of I discussed this before. We sorted out the ID3 chapters and all kinds of other fancy features. So that seems to actually all be coming together. The next part I have to work on is basically getting all the data from the old website over to the new website with some sort of ETL process. And once that's in place, the finish line isn't close, but the the first finish line, I guess, of take down the old website and put up the new website becomes pretty close.
Yep.
With only, a small pile of small tasks to accomplish to make that happen. Verifying all the redirects are correct and things of that nature.
I do want to take a moment to highlight and praise Scott here, because GeekNights, as a philosophy from the beginning, one thing that we were both like really, really mad about is when links break and people don't follow the basic contract of the internet. And this would all be a lot easier if we didn't insist on never breaking a URL and never taking down content we have published.
Yeah, I mean, you got to realize, like, the GeekNights website was at first a WordPress, I think. Right?
Yep.
And so if you have some link to some old WordPress posting, it's like it's still, I believe it would still work now, and I'm going to make sure it continues to still work and redirect to.
Yep.
It's like...
Never mind the cruft of, we were using the advanced features of Libsyn when Libsyn launched. Those features are no longer the advanced features. They are charitably called the legacy features.
Right. It's,
I think we are literally their oldest customer.
It's quite possible we could be. But yeah, so, sorting out all that shit, we'll replace the old website with the new one as soon as the new one achieves feature parity. And then at that point, the new website will be open source on GitHub, and you will be able to watch the progress and also submit, if you want to help out, if you have the skills to do so.
And, if you're trying to start a podcast, guess what will be a really cool framework you could use?
Yeah, it might be difficult to just copy the website and deploy it yourself.
Well, because it is made for the kind of thing that we do.
Yeah, it's but regardless, the progress has been happening, especially since I haven't had any work to do. But I haven't done any work on it in, let's say, 3 or 4 days because I've been doing other stuff. But I'm gonna, this week there's gonna be some more progress happening. Probably, tomorrow.
And the thing is, once the new website is live, that lights a fire under both of us for a lot of the new kinds of content and experimental stuff and other projects we want to do. So,
well, there's already a long list of features to be added to the website, right?
Yep.
So we got to work on those also, but prioritize them and whatnot.
Yep. So, let's just get right into it with a show that we came up with because our friends are currently arguing about the nature of refrigerators for a bunch of reasons. So realize we have talked about cooling PCs. We've also talked about PC cooling. One of the rare instances where I think I snuck in an episode twice. We've talked about server rooms. We've talked about HVAC. Never talked about refrigeration. As a technology, arguably.
Well, I mean, we don't need to explain how refrigeration works with compressors and whatnot, right? You can look that up on YouTube and find better visualizations of it. I think even Rim's favorite technology guy, whatever, has a video or two on it also.
Suffice it to say, the only thing you need to know, if you don't know, is that all refrigeration as a concept, it does one of two things, and that's it. It either removes heat from an environment into a medium in some fashion, like, say, dry ice in a room. It's pulling heat into something to cool the space, or it is actively pumping heat out of a space into the broader environment. It's just a heat pump. If you Google for heat pump, there are plenty of people, like Scott said, who will explain it to you. So skipping that aside.
There's many different methods of doing this that vary, sometimes in big ways, sometimes in small ways, but, regardless, that's what you're doing.
Less than 200 years ago, the primary way a lot of people in America got things like ice was harvesting it from rivers in the winter and storing it under bales of hay. Refrigeration.
Where the hell they got dry ice from?
I'm trying to think about. I know about methods from the 1900s to make dry ice. I don't know if and how dry ice might have been made before that. Actually, I don't know the history of dry ice at all. I realize, other than that one thing. Anyway, but all that aside,
remember though that my grandfather talking about how back in the day, right? It's like you look at today and people drive food around, right? And other things that need to be cold in refrigerated trucks, just a big truck that has a refrigerator attached to it. Right?
Yeah.
The inside of the truck is cold. And now you can drive meat around town, right? In the summer, right? But he said back in the day, all they would do is just have a truck and throw a piece of dry ice in the truck and maybe put a fan near it. And that was it. And the truck would be cold as hell.
Yep. All right. Yes, dry ice was observed and documented in detail in the 1830s. And it looks like in the early 1900s is when manufacturing processes that are not that different from what we do today were invented.
And Rim has read Wikipedia to you as a service.
Yep, because I was curious. I did not know if they were able to make dry ice in the late 1800s. And the answer seems to be sort of.
Okay. Regardless, all the ways of keeping things cold back in the day, meaning not, up until relatively recently in terms of human history, was get cold shit and put it near the shit that needs to be cold until it runs out, and then get more cold shit. Even in the 20th century, right, you had the ice box, right? They didn't have refrigerators in houses.
Yeah.
You'd have someone deliver fucking ice to your house. You'd put the ice into the bottom of the fridge, right? The fridge would be cold until the ice melted, and then they would deliver more ice. And that's how you kept food in your house from spoiling.
So my grandparents had, when I was a kid, I might have talked about this on Geek Nights like more than a decade ago. They had a General Electric refrigerator from the late 1940s. And it wasn't their primary fridge. They had a more recent fridge in the main house, but in the furnace room, they had that old late 40s fridge, and it still worked. And they were still using it because they thought it was neat. It never had any maintenance other than some lubrication at any point. And as a kid, I was vaguely obsessed with it. And all they stored in there was soda pop.
Mm-hmm.
It had this really cool, like, chunky latching mechanism to open it.
Yep, that's how they do.
Yep, and you had to manually defrost it. But, so early refrigerators that plugged into an outlet and used electricity, like, my grandparents...
There was one thing about for the ice boxes, right? There's one thing about the icebox that I never knew and still don't know, but I only have a guess, which is that, the ice cube would melt, the big ice cube, right? Then they bring a new one.
Yep.
Did you just drain the water down the drain? Or drink the water? Or, because the old ice cube melted into water, it didn't disappear. What did they do? Did they pump it out? Like, what did they do with the water from the old ice cube?
So the Wikipedia page doesn't actually say much about it, except it talks a lot about how all nice ice chests had spigots to drain it and catch pans and holding tanks.
Okay, so you would drain it and it would go down the drain into the sewer?
Yeah, pretty much. I doubt people...
Like down the sink, basically?
Unless you lived somewhere where...
guess.
If you lived somewhere where you didn't have running water in your house, which, frankly, in the early 1900s in the U.S., not that uncommon.
But if you lived in a place without running water, you really going to be in range of an ice delivery man?
Might have. Small town. A lot of small
I guess so, but
lot of houses in the 20s did not have...
Since it's just water, it is safe to just drain it like out into the backyard or some shit, right?
Yeah.
As long as you don't drain it on your kitchen floor.
But like we had a beefy dehumidifier in the basement when I was a kid, and we would actually take that water and use it to water the plants in the house. Just why not?
Yeah, why not?
But yeah, refrigeration, like this is I talk about this a lot on Geek Nights, but in general, one of the most important things you can do if you care about technology is not to just focus on the bleeding edge of the cool new stuff we can do, but to think about technology that works and how it can be distributed more equitably, used more efficiently, etc. Refrigeration is one of the most important things humans have ever invented.
Yeah, if you play Civilization, it gets a whole spot on the tech tree. I think in every Civilization game that I'm aware of.
I think so.
Has its own item.
It's like, oh yeah, double food from all your shit now.
Yep. Exactly,
your cities can just grow like crazy. See also sewers.
Yep.
Hospitals, that concept of hospitals.
After plumbing, after plumbing, I think refrigeration is like the next most important, invention for human society.
Yep. I mean, it's to the point to where...
Although it is dependent on electricity, which at least kind of, right? Mostly.
There are
so
plenty...
rank electricity higher, kind of.
But there are plenty of of cooling mechanisms that are as effective as modern day refrigeration that uses electricity that do not require electricity. There's lots of ways to do it.
True, but the vast majority of refrigeration around the world is the electric kind. Right?
Yep. But I think the most important thing about it is just that it allowed perishable food to be stored with relative safety.
Yep.
Like beyond everything else. Because even in a modern world in the year 2022, where I have a refrigerator and a freezer, I still have to put a not insignificant amount of mental effort into thinking about the safety of various foods and what should be stored where. And can this be frozen? Can this be refrigerated? Should this be refrigerated? Some foods shouldn't be refrigerated, like tomatoes.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, think about this. Back in the day, before refrigeration, right? It's like, okay, you either had to eat everything fresh or, right, you store some food. Okay, well, then what if, you might have to any food you want to store, you don't have to do some sort of preservation work, right? Like, maybe can it or, what's it called? Like, you can't just save the beef for tomorrow. You got to make some beef jerky instead, right? It's like, stuff like that. So
like leftovers were difficult. Leftovers like we know them today are basically impossible without refrigeration.
Right. It's like, okay. And then you have this sort of battle going on. It's like, do I save food? Do I eat more food than I can stomach? Do I go hungry? The food's older, but do I eat it anyway and risk getting sick? Do I even know that the food will make me sick? Right? Just have warm meat lying around. Yep.
Yeah. And while there are a bunch of adjacent technologies that have achieved similar results, like to keep things cool, like evaporative coolers, like those have existed since ancient times, they are much less reliable and they're not as controllable. The big thing about the refrigeration we're talking about, like a modern fridge, is that you pick a temperature and it is at that temperature.
Mm-hmm. Also, you talk about, food traveling, right? So it's like you'd have to eat food that came from somewhere close. You couldn't eat a food that, wouldn't, a spoilable food that came from far away, like you get a fruit from another country. It's like you couldn't have that. It would be disgusting by the time it took a boat over, or even if it's like a plane somehow, I guess planes and refrigerators were invented around, but, it's like before that, you'd have to take a boat and it's like, it would be rotten. It's like you would never be able to eat that unless you went to the other place. Then you could eat the food from there. But you couldn't have brought the food from home, right? It would be disgusting by the time you got to the other side, right? It's like, on boats, it's like the navies would be bringing around live animals on the boat, because otherwise, it's like if you just had all the animals pre-butchered, it's like, guess what? You're not gonna make it across the ocean.
Yep. Similarly, most of the food they brought was all the food you imagine on a Napoleonic era ship. Yep. Weevils and hard bread and salt pork.
Exactly. So, yeah, refrigeration was huge. So modern day, right? You go and you probably just buy a fucking refrigerator.
Yep.
But there's so many different ones now. When I was a kid, everyone I knew just had like the standard refrigerator.
There were two kinds.
Top, fridge on the bottom.
When I was a kid, there were exactly two kinds of fridges. Everyone, with a handful of exceptions, had what you described. And there were a handful of kids whose parents were rich, who lived in like the nicer houses and the newer developments in the suburbs. They had the early versions of those like modern fancy refrigerators with a bunch of features on them, like an ice thing and a water thing in the front and the doors that open to the sides.
I didn't see any of those until like the mid to late 90s.
I saw those.
They probably existed earlier, but I didn't see any.
I saw them in the houses of a handful of kids I knew in like middle school who were way richer than us and lived in way nicer suburbs than we did.
What I did see were people who had, larger houses. They had garages and large basements.
We had a beverage fridge. We had a fridge in the kitchen, and we had basically, when we bought that new fridge, the old fridge wasn't that broken. It was just like old and inefficient. We stuck it in the garage, and that became the soda fridge.
Oh, yeah, we might have done that if we had such a space, right, in our house. But we also didn't drink soda, so it wasn't really a thing. But people had chest freezers. So.
We also had a chest freezer.
Yeah, there would be the people with the chest freezers, for example, right? Like I remember. You'd like buy your turkey on Thanksgiving and, you go to the person's house who had the chest freezer and leave it in there until Thanksgiving. Then you would go there, the day before Thanksgiving.
If I had enough space for it, I would 100% have a chest freezer today.
Fridge to store a whole fucking turkey, right?
I would absolutely have a chest freezer if there was anywhere to put it in this apartment.
Yeah.
There's also there are the Peltier, like there's chest freezers and chest refrigerators that are designed for long-term storage to be energy efficient. And they tend to have a really weak sauce Peltier device instead of the more traditional cooling. And they basically take a long time to get cold. But if you don't open often, they just stay cold using almost no electricity.
I mean, the best memory I had of chest freezers was the people across the street had one in the garage, and that's where they put the popsicles. So it's like you didn't have to go in their house to go and get a popsicle. You could just be like, bam, you're already outside having a good time. Just like, boom, popsicle right there.
I remember going into random friends' parents' garages and just taking ice cream and popsicles out of their chest freezer, probably without permission because the kids would all just kind of do this.
We did. It was equal opportunity, except for our house because ours were in the freezer.
Though what I do, the thing that always did bother me is every fridge I've ever seen that has an external port for water and ice, that shit never works.
Okay, well, first of all, so it works sometimes, right? The thing that bothers me is inconsistent design. A lot of times I try to use it and it's like the design of what I'm supposed to do is not obvious. Like some of them, there's like the plastic thing, you push your cup into it.
Yep.
And it's like, that should make water come out. And some of them, that makes the ice come out. And some of them makes the water come out. Some of them don't even have that. Some of them, you got to push buttons on the face of the thing to make stuff happen.
A lot of times they have a dial or like a switch and you set it to what you want to happen when the plastic thing gets hit.
And there should only ever be 2 buttons. Spit out water and spit out ice. Some of these things have more buttons. What the fuck are those buttons for? Like, seriously?
Crushed ice versus chopped ice, even though they end up being kind of the same on most of these things.
I don't give it. Who gives a shit? If you give a shit about that, you got problems, right? And then the other thing is like, I guess if you're extra fancy, I imagine, I've never seen one. There must be one out there that will like carbonate the water, right? Which I don't drink, but okay, if that's the case, I could if you're that person, I could maybe say the 3rd button is okay.
Well, I guess I never like when a half-assed version of a feature is put into an inappropriate device, as opposed to most people probably don't need this feature, and if people who really want or need it, get a dedicated, specialized device to do that thing. Like, if I were that guy, I would have a specialized ice maker, like, in my bar.
Well, I mean, if you are in a place where, let's say, the water is not so drinkable from the tap, right?
Yeah.
And
you want to filter it and keep it cold.
Even for me, like my water is drinkable from the tap. I'm in New York City, like the best water, among the best waters, right? But a lot of our fridge space is taken up by water pitchers, water bottles, right? Things of that nature. If we had the spigot on the front of the fridge, right, then I could save a lot of space in the fridge by not having all this water like saved up and all the time. It's like, I could drink from the tap, but that's the point is to make it cold first.
Yeah.
Like
at least our tap is shockingly cold, even in the dead of summer, for some reason in our building.
Sometimes, but it is a useful feature to have for space savings, right?
Yeah.
The ice that goes right into the glass. Okay,
I just find that most of the times when I try to use one of those things at someone else's house or like in an Airbnb or anywhere that I encounter one, they fail in some way. Even the last time I visited my brother, I go to use the ice maker and suddenly he's like, ice maker doesn't really work. Don't do it. Don't touch it.
Yep.
I just feel like they're cheap and they tend to break.
Our fridge has the kind of ice maker I like, which is the one where you could turn it on and off. Right now it's on because I just used a bunch of ice, but I'll turn it off soon once the bucket fills up. But basically there's a bucket in the freezer and you just turn it on and you wait and eventually the freezer bucket is full of ice, just tons of ice. And I like this because ice cube trays, I used to use those and it's like you have to fill them, carry them to the freezer full of water. You can't really have that many trays in the freezer because there's not enough room and you don't have that much ice. And then it sublimates if you don't use it quickly enough and then you don't have ice when you want it. The bucket full of ice in the freezer is just like, yep, there's just a fucking bucket full of ice. You can go wild with the ice. It's like, you want to get, you don't put a couple cubes in a glass. You're like, just dip your glass in there like you're scooping. You just scoop it all the way full, right? Take a water bottle, just jam it with ice all the way to the top. You don't get to give a shit.
Yeah.
So much ice. And you don't have to, you don't have to work. You don't have to, remember to manage the ice or to make cubes or to fill anything. It's always there. And if it ever runs low, you push the button until it's full again.
Oh.
And then when it's done, you push the button one more time.
Now, for whatever reason, I don't use ice. Like, I almost never use ice in my day-to-day life.
I only use ice this time of year. I use a lot of ice, and then I don't. So the button is pushed right now for like the 1 week of the year or whatever.
So all I have is one little silicone tray that makes 4 giant ice cubes with a cover on it so they don't sublimate. And anytime I use 2 of them, I put some water in there. So I always have ice cubes.
I mean, this time of year, I'm filling coolers, I'm filling water bottles.
Coolers. I just go to the bodega and buy a bag of ice for $1.
That costs money, and you got to carry the ice. And
Bodega's right there.
It's work, right?
Also, our freezer's usually pretty much full of food.
Ours is not that full of food. There's only 2 people living here. Why would you have that much food in there?
We keep a lot of stuff in there.
Eat it.
Yeah, and we fill it with more. But living in an apartment is a little annoying because there are better fridges. Like, I get a much better fridge than what we have, but I don't own this place. Building owns the fridge.
You don't have a choice of fridge, so I've never bought a fridge in my life.
Yep, as much as I would want to. And what's funny is a lot of people, even now, I see our friends still debating fridges. A lot of people have a lot of shocking misconceptions about like how different configurations of fridges being more or less efficient, and it's almost all aesthetics and style, and very little of it affects the efficiency. But from what I do know, a handful of things that people would think would be more efficient end up being way less efficient. Like, case in point, the drawer freezer, those things just jettison cold air compared to a regular one.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know how many people realize that, like, you have a fridge, the cooling is all happening in the freezer, right? The fridge part of your refrigerator is actually just getting sort of, the cool air left over from the freezer sort of goes into the fridge by like a vent, and that's what makes the fridge cold. All the actual active cooling is happening in the freezer zone. So the classic style with the freezer on top, cold air goes down, warm air goes up, is much more efficient than the freezer on bottom kind, right? Because the cold air from the freezer just naturally goes down into the fridge on its own. If you have to make the cold air go up, well, now it's not so simple, right? You might have to have a little fan in there. Who knows?
Now, I will admit, if I owned a place and I were rich, I would be really interested in one of those integrated refrigeration systems where you don't have just one big fridge. You just have some of your cupboards are just refrigerated to different temperatures.
Mm-hmm. I mean, as inefficient and wasteful as that is, the convenience and amazingness of like, hey, next to your cabinet full of glasses is a refrigerated cabinet full of beverages. And then, next to where the cutting board is, right, in your work area, well, that's where the vegetable fridge is.
But also, depending, that could be more efficient if done in a nuanced way around things like not everything needs to be cooled to the temperature of a refrigerator. That we pick that temperature because that is safe for pretty much anything for a short amount of time. Like, that is a food safety temperature we've chosen. But like a lot of vegetables, they'll keep longer.
Also could be customized per fridge. Yeah.
If they just need to be kept at a consistent temperature that's slightly lower than room temperature. So a really weak sauce Peltier system for the vegetable crisper could mean you don't have to waste all this energy cooling all your lettuces to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Like, you could actually probably save energy. But it's hard to calculate that because those are bespoke systems. Like, that's not something you just go and buy. That's something a rich person gets installed into their house.
Yeah, I mean, there are non-rich people who do have multiple fridges for other reasons, right? Most notably, people
wine fridge,
kosher, and they got to separate their meat fridge from their dairy fridge.
Yep, I used to have because it was a gift, and it was actually really useful. I had a wine fridge that all it did is chill wine, but wine doesn't need to get that cold, so it saved energy because it just kept the wine at the temperature you would drink it. You type a number in, it just keeps it. But when that broke, I did not replace it because now I live in a tiny apartment.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I guess there's, the last thing I guess would be the other arrangements of fridges, right? A lot of people seem to have strong opinions about like the doors, whether you should get the splitting doors or...
My only preferences there is anything where there's a divider between the two left and right side of the fridge seems just a complete waste of space.
Yeah, mine has the top doors split in the middle, but the inside of the fridge is one cavern. There's no split in the fridge.
Yeah. I like just one big cavern and then a smaller one big cavern for the freezer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I really don't care too much about people have such strong opinions. Like, I don't care about the doors, right? I care about the efficiency.
Yep.
I care about how much space is inside to store food as long as it's enough for the food I have. And I care that it fits in the the kitchen and fits nicely. And
which again, living in an apartment, like one minor annoyance of our fridge, our apartment's big, but it's still
swing out and hit things or block the way or.
There is no way to remove the left bottom crisper drawer from our fridge without removing the entire refrigerator door. Because you cannot open the fridge door all the way around because it's up against the wall. And that's just an annoyance. There's literally no way around that. And that is not a concern for pretty much anyone who lives in a house. But if you live in an apartment...
That is a chore I do like once a year, is take all the things out of the fridge and clean them, all the shelves and the drawers and everything.
That one shelf, what I do is when it's time to clean it...
in the fridge.
I open the fridge door and then I clean it as fast as possible. Like I'm in and out of there so quick.
Yep. It is nice to have a rearrangeable shelf, and such and such.
Yep.
Oh, the one other feature that our current fridge has that actually I do like is that if you accidentally leave the door open, it'll start beeping at you.
Ooh.
Which would have been a great help earlier in life. But our fridges did not do that.
So one time, I think I talked about this in GeekNights, we lost everything in the fridge because the door, like a pressure thing happened, and the door popped open a tiny bit. There was just it was opened by like this tiniest bit. And actually, a lot of the fridge, especially the lower part, still stayed like pretty cold. But it was just open wide enough to where the light bulb in there turned on. And that light bulb was an incandescent bulb pumping out 20 to 40 watts of heat. And it basically cooked everything in the top of the fridge. So I had to throw out everything. Had it not been an incandescent bulb, we probably would have lost almost nothing in that incident. So I did replace both bulbs in our fridge with fridge-safe, cold temperature rated LEDs, and they output basically zero heat. Like, it's kind of amazing.
Yeah, my previous fridge, my previous apartment, I replaced the bulbs, but in this current fridge, I just have whatever it came with. I don't even know. I guess if they die, I'm going to replace them with the best possible LED. But
does he got to get an LED that's designed for fridges, or you're going to have trouble?
Obviously, you always put a fridge-specific bulb in there.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
anyway.
Yeah, refrigeration, super important to humans. I camp and hike. I like camping and hiking and all that stuff. And can't just bring a fridge with you.
I guess the last thing is that, a lot of other features have been added to fridges these days. They're trying to, they get some fucking, computers in there and like things to tell you how much food is left or, do some smart fridge bullshit. All that stuff sucks. Get that shit out of here.
Yep.
Do not connect your refrigerator to the internet. I don't want a fridge with a screen on it. No, I don't want none of that shit. Get that out of here.
Yep. Unless the fridge were smart enough to, on its own, without me having to do anything, know an inventory of everything that's in it and provide that to me via an open format.
That's what they say they can do, but no.
Yep. Call me when they do that without me having to configure anything and without me having to connect it to the internet.
Yeah. Anyway.
I think it's a good enough show.